The story sets in the battle against the Corpse God, where the soldiers are suffering heavy casualties without making much progress. The legendary Calamity Crusher Shagrua Edith Lugrit is summoned as casualties mount, ushering the wounded to safety. Shagrua stands as a sole hope against the nefarious Corpse God, wielding formidable powers. As the renowned Calamity Crusher takes the battlefield, the enemy swiftly commands an undead army, launching a merciless assault. Undeterred, Shagrua displays unparalleled strength, surmounting all obstacles to narrow the gap between them. In the climactic moments, the Corpse God employs inexplicable magic, but Shagrua, undaunted, pierces through, reaching his throat and penetrating to the brain. The story then turns to modern Japan. Well, Shagrua's battle against the Corpse God was so intense, even the plot got a makeover in modern Japan. A confused boy with a foggy memory and a wound to his neck finds himself in a dark alley and struggles to recall how he got there. Two police officers eventually ask him his name, and he barely recalls that he is Polka Shinoyama. Meanwhile, an assassin is keeping a close eye on the boy, as he is presumably paid to kill him. Then suddenly a girl grabs his hands and runs away with Polka. She takes him to a dark alley, and it is then revealed that she is the killer who previously slit his throat. As Polka tries to run for his life, he ends up in a dingy room along with Misaki, where he could see the dead bodies with his dead eye. Misaki mocks the fact that Polka seems like the kind of person who would just go on and on about respecting life. She then rushes towards him to finally take his life. Just as she's getting closer, Polka says that she should not handle life so lightly, as they are just playthings. He then uses magic somehow, and giant arms protrude out of the magical space that he creates, which takes Misaki's life. Elsewhere, Sir Shagrua is still unsure whether he managed to defeat the Corpse God or not, as he used some inexplicable magic in the very last moments of their battle. Rekuria tries to reassure him that they have failed to find any traces of the Corpse God after a lot of investigation, so he does not need to worry. But it turns out that Shagrua's suspicion is not misguided, as the Corpse God has been reincarnated as Polka Shinoyama in the modern world. A long time ago, all the Corpse God desired was peace, but that seemed inevitable because of constant conflict and violence. However, he used his incredible powers to fight back against his enemies, and waited for a warrior who could eventually slay him. As he looked at Misaki's dead body, Polka discovers that when Misaki was just a young girl, her parents were murdered right in front of her. That memory stuck with her, and she ended up becoming an unhinged killer who was feared by everyone. She eventually avenged her parents' death by killing their murderer. So when she was asked by Lisa to kill Polka, she felt it was a nice challenge, as she wanted to find out how messed up she was. Interestingly, she did not feel bad even for a single moment when she stuck Polka in the neck with a metal rod. Shortly after injuring him, she decides she needs to do just one more thing, and that is to try to take her own life. Just when she is about to jump to her death, she gets a call from Takumi, who informs her that Polka is surprisingly still alive. When Misaki goes to kill Polka again, she gets murdered by him in the process. However, Polka manages to use his magic to revive her. Later on, Takumi shares a video of a fire at a building nearby that has many children living in it. Polka offers to help to everyone's surprise. Takumi guides him to the building, and with the help of the dead parents' souls, the Corpse God manages to save everyone and then escapes. Some of the videos from the event become viral on the internet. As Takumi looks at those visuals on Twitter, he cannot help but feel conflicted about Polka's duality. He feels that Polka is quite strange, considering the fact that he was playing with Misaki's life moments earlier, and all of a sudden showed immense sympathy towards children caught in fire, whom he ended up saving. One moment he's dealing with an unhinged killer, the next he's saving kids from a blazing building. Talk about a Polka's career switch. Cool, huh? Later, as he talks about peace, Lisa inquires to Polka about his version of the idea and then mentions that he will need money to achieve that goal. But when she asks about his future plans in more concrete terms, Polka mentions that he wants to use his magical abilities as a necromancer to achieve power and a place where he truly belongs so that he can live in a state of undisturbed peace. After Misaki finally comes back to her senses, she reads the news from the previous day and is thrilled to learn that ghost-like figures were videotaped during the building fire, where Polka saved the orphans. Meanwhile, Polka is still trying to understand the present world he is in, and reads as much as possible about it. During his conversation with Takumi, he reveals that he plans to ensure that he leads a peaceful life by figuring out who actually paid for him to be assassinated. Polka does not mind investigating the situation on his own, and is keeping the option to force Clarissa into revealing the truth as his last resort. He also tells Takumi about his previous life and is honest about everything. However, he's eager to learn how he could put his powers to use and earn money. Luckily, that's when a man requests Misaki's help to save him from hitmen. The corpse god immediately accepts the assignment, and later that day, they visit the location to execute their mission. But Misaki is suddenly ambushed and is twice by one of the men while she is busy fighting other gang members. When they turn their attention to Polka, he reveals that Misaki is now a zombie and therefore cannot die. The two of them fight together to take out every single gang member. Eventually, the corpse god uses his giant skeleton body to crush all of them in a giant ball of mud. Meanwhile, Polka tells Misaki that her bites now have a paralyzing effect. Naturally, she is quite eager to use it and bites Polka's shoulder, after which he slumps to the ground. Polka's got Misaki on his team now with the added bonus of zombie powers and a biting talent that's paralyzing. Forget gangsters, these two could have their own supernatural detective agency. After the effects of paralyzing finally wear off, Polka wakes up from sleep and continues to discuss random things with Takumi. They even briefly considered the idea that there is a possibility that the world that the corpse god came from and the one he is now in are probably connected in some manner. Meanwhile, Misaki is still excited about putting the paralysis effect on her bites to good use. That's when Takumi reminds Polka about the gang members he just killed. But to his surprise, the corpse god reveals that those men are still alive, and he only incapacitated them. His commitment to not taking lives leaves Takumi dumbfounded. However, Polka also mentions the fact that the gang members won't be able to take any lives in the future. Elsewhere, Tsubaki and Kozaburo are summoned by the police to look at the crime because of the obvious occultic evidence there. Standing in front of a whiteboard, Tsubaki shows to the other members of Comp's 3 various troublemakers: the Gator Sisters, the Barber, Riddle, the Grocer, the Poisoner, Donner, and Phantom Solitaire. All of them are troublemakers who are either incarcerated or dead. He explains how cracking unbelievable cases are such as these which cannot be made public. He then gestures to the 3 troublemakers who are still at large: the Grim Reaper, Fire-Breathing Bug, and Lemmings. He surmises that Fire-Breathing Bug may be responsible for the fire at Shakuzawa Building, as Saki explains how Lemmings' footprints were found at the scene of the knotted-up humans from the day before. Meanwhile, at the same time, Corpse God is transferring the soul of the real Polka from Takumi's drone to a stuffed shark toy. Takumi enthusiastically welcomes his drone back home, while Corpse God tells the real Polka that he will borrow his name and identity a little longer, all the while apologizing. Misaka Sakimiya enters the room, excitedly inquiring about the cute shark toy, not knowing she is hugging the real Polka. Takumi says that the real Polka might be a weirdo too, as he is getting excited about the girl who killed him. Polka attempts to retort, but cannot speak. Corpse God explains how he could allow Polka to talk, but it would require a fresh pair of human vocal cords, as creating some from scratch would take too much mana. He then says that before worrying about their monetary situation, he should focus on replenishing his magic, and that exorcising ghosts would be an effective way to do so. Meanwhile, Tsubaki Iwanome enters Yotokoro, saying that he is glad he was able to catch Clarissa this time and that he would like a chat with her. He asks Lisa about her involvement with yesterday's Shakuzawa fire and the tangled humans. In the subsequent moment, a flashback plays out with Takumi explaining her previous experience with Arase, how the detective single-handedly wiped out the gang that Takumi previously belonged to, and that he is scary. Later, back at the Shinjuku police station, Arase asks Saki Aikawa to investigate the footprint left by the kick to his abdomen from earlier, exclaiming how funny that is. Aikawa recognizes it as a woman's shoe and asks Arase as to what he was doing. 2 other investigators are seen talking about Lemmings. One of them explains how Lemmings is a mysterious and dangerous man, willing to do any job, and moreover remarks that he has seen him in action. Takumi notices Arase heading out of the police station, realizing that the policeman is headed to Yotokoro. Takumi spills his coffee, completely missing that Lemmings can also be seen being on the move on his camera. Arase arrives at the bar, leading to a comedic moment where Misaki exclaims that he is the guy who tried to hit her and force himself on her, the latter of which Arase denies. Shortly after, Lemmings reveals himself hanging from a chandelier in the bar. Clarissa instructs Koruto and Izuna not to attack Lemmings just yet, since he would have killed someone already if that had been his intention. Kozaburo similarly tells Iwanome to stop trying to guess Lemmings' true intentions, as analysis is pointless when they should focus on capturing a nationally most wanted criminal. Iwanome reminds Arase that witnesses are present, darkness notwithstanding, as Arase and his men prepare to attack. Misaki Sakimiya whispers to Corpse God that Lemmings is probably far more frightening than the police. Corpse God agrees, frozen in place, for he can see a mass of spirits hovering above Lemmings, possibly his victims, in a warring state of fear and hatred. Shortly after, two of Arase's underlings are flung into a wall by lemmings, followed by a third. Arase kicks up a broken bottle and drives its jagged end into Lemming's torso, while Deathclaw Saya leads patrons, potential witnesses, as Iwanome haplessly reiterates towards the exit. Lemmings ducks, weaves, and sprints across all the skeletal blades and arms that Corpse God throws at him. Occasionally, he punches back, bandaging fists, shattering skeletal hands for far greater size, and consequently shattering bottles and glasses until he finally shatters that which holds Misaki. He murmurs a question in her ear that she refuses to answer. In another scene, Shinjuku is bathed in an early sunset when Lemmings reports back to Takeru Shinoyama, who throws a file and attached Shinoyama family photograph onto his desk and chides Lemmings for taking unusually long to return. Misaki puts Takumi Kuruya's call on speaker as she and a disquieted corpse god walk down the street. Takumi exclaims that they survived an encounter with one of Shinjuku's urban legends, more or less, and assumes that Corpse God accomplished this by expending much of his magical reserves. Corpse God confirms this to be true, but says that he recouped the magic and gained more, besides from the sheer number of spirits haunting Lemmings. Corpse God remembers how his necromancy mentor encouraged him to help someone if he wanted to, no matter how long he had known that person. However, Corpse God does not have the habits and experiences of someone local to Japan, let alone Earth. Hosorogi anonymously writes to an amazed Takumi and Misaki that he is honored to meet acquaintances of the famed intermediary Clarissa. However, his expression gives way dishonesty when he floats the idea of legally flipping this building via duping a land swindler. After a while, Takeru smiles thinly at the good news of Polka being fine, as he glances over at a man, Shinoyama personnel, using binoculars to spy on Polka through the window. He remarks that he shall have to assign Polka a babysitter, and sternly cautions the twins to be careful as well. There is no guarantee that an accident like that which happened to Suzuka Shinoyama cannot happen again. Later, in a traditional Japanese home, Rozan muses over the idea of Polka playing a magician in Shinjuku. He supposes that Polka must have gotten it from his mother, Kanon Shinoyama. With a grin, he further supposes that he cannot die just yet. Shizuku Kazuki, both closely shadowed by a smoldering spirit, and Takeru Shinoyama welcome Corpse God and Misaki to the Shinoyama mansion, where the five have lunch with Takeru's wife Kiri, Polka's half-niece Sayo, and Rozan's nephew-in-law. Misaki explains that Polka saved her on several occasions, the first of which was a suicide attempt. This seems to be a little out of character for Polka, but not entirely impossible, since Takeru seems willing to believe that Polka did discover a new him after all. He is more surprised that Polka somehow acquainted himself with Sakimiya Steel's heiress, whose parents had helped Takeru in his younger years. Later, during Takumi's earlier briefing on Polka's family tree, Takumi had warned Corpse God to beware Takeru out of Polka's relatives most of all. Takeru is the 26-year-old president of Shinoyama Security, which Miyabi had described to Corpse God as the branch responsible for doing Shinoyama's group's dirty work, where Corpse God and Takeru make for reserved lunch conversationalists. Misaki and Kiri make up for them. Kiri warmly tells Misaki that she can ask the Shinoyamas for help whenever she needs to. Meanwhile, Rozan's nephew-in-law, whose name the real Polka does not remember, takes the opportunity to welcome Polka back. The rest of Polka's relatives are out working, with Polka's half-brother and half-sister-in-law specified to be overseas, save for Rozan, who enters the dining room to thank Sayo for recommending a shark movie he recently liked and finished. When Rozan finally turns his attention to his apologetic runaway son, he offers Polka a warm welcome home in lieu of a rebuke before inviting him to the mansion's annex for a private conversation. Later, as Corpse God is about to answer Rozan's question as to what has happened to the real Polka, he looks abruptly in the direction of the mansion, though it is shielded from view by a thicket of trees. He tells Rozan that the twins are in potential danger, from which he must protect them, and promises to answer Rozan's question later. Well, after all that family drama, even the ghosts are turning in for the next episode of Corpse God Chronicles, because in this mansion, skeletons aren't just in the closets. 2 years earlier, Suzuka stumbles upon Shizuki, consoling a tearful Kazuki who laments losing her purse in the woods. Despite the late hours, Suzuka locates it only to realize it's a gift she had given her sister. As she overhears nearby voices, a bodyguard informs her cousin's husband about a 2-year preparation period for the relative's ambitious plan. Fast forward to the present, in Tokyo Penitentiary, Tsubaki and Kozaburo Arase visit the enigmatic Phantom Solitaire. In the ensuing scene, two colossal skeletal hands intercept debris, preventing it from burying Kazuki and Shizuki. Subsequently, on an overhead bridge, fire-breathing Bug melodiously sings a children's song while their imposter succumbs to flames. Lemmings informs Takeru that Polka reached Kazuki and Shizuki before he did, upon which Takeru asks for details. Once situated in the annex, Rozan dismisses his 3 hidden bodyguards when Corpse God requests privacy. Corpse God explains that he is an otherworlder who reincarnated in Polka's corpse and alluded to Misaki's culpability for Polka's death. Misaki says that Rozan would be within his rights to kill her, and that she is unafraid of him, for he is a good person. The little shark plush flings between Misaki and Rozan's katana and spreads its flippers wide, just as a young Polka had done for his pet albino crocodile, Shiro, when Rozan intended to kill it. Rozan incredulously recognizes the plush as Polka and bursts into laughter, both at the ridiculous situation and how Polka seems to be enjoying himself. Since Corpse God needs his own vessel before he can return to Polka, his body, Rozan is willing to provide Corpse God one of the Shinoyama group's androids. Polka calls dibs on being a robot instead, enthusiastically demanding modifications like a rock drill and flight capabilities. Later on, outside the damaged manor, Polka informs Takumi over a call that he had told Rozan the truth. Misaki finally apologizes to Polka for murdering him and thanks him for coming to her defense. Polka, if anything, is more upset about losing his textbooks and video games to the fire than his own death. Kazuki and Shizuki then run over and thank Misaki and Polka for saving their lives. Polka replies that the credit goes to the fortune teller Corpse God and the twins' guardian angel. Priorities, right? Before Corpse God and Misaki check on Polka's pet, Misaki asks Corpse God if he intends to form a contract with Suzuka. Corpse God looks back at Suzuka, hugging the twins in utter contentment. Eventually he replies, but not now. Comps 3 assembles for an emergency meeting wherein Iwanome briefs his subordinates on Solitaire's criminal career, which consisted of 3 years' worth of magic tricks and delusions and ended when Solitaire turned himself in. Solitaire had never hurt or killed anyone, unless one counts Japanese stock or the reputation of Japanese security, which took a tumble when Solitaire captured and released Japan's prime minister and the opposition party leaders. This stunt gave Solitaire a global spotlight that he had squandered, for he demanded no money or other boons. Iwanome flicks through the television channels with increasing alarm for each broadcast the same feed. The news anchor, Solitaire, removes his glasses and announces that he will be resuming his performance a week from now, so the police ought to take advantage of their grace period. Iwanome says he probably bought airtime from the grocer, who remains as much of a merchant in his cell as he was out of it. Sayo, having invited herself to the abandoned building as its new lodger, tells her new housemates, Misaki and Takumi, that it was nice to meet them. She introduces herself as Polka's niece, and her attendant Jiayu as apparently a trainee butler, something she only learned today. Misaki, unlike Takumi, does not need to introduce herself since Sayo remembers her from brunch. Corpse God asks why Sayo has come and receives a morose, oblique reply about toasted sharks that Xiaoyu translates. Young Miss Sayo's bedroom and shark memorabilia collection were consumed by the estate fire. He plays a pre-recorded video of Rozan Shinoyama asking Polka to take in Sayo and her bodyguard for now because Polka's bedroom was also incinerated. The video soon ends and so does their conversation. Misaki and Takumi leave. Meanwhile, Xiaoyu is already awake when Corpse God and Sayo are both eventually roused by cheerly sunlight streaming through the window pane. Thereupon, Sayo asks her half-uncle if he finds such nice days as refreshing. In another scene, quick as a flash, Xiaoyu has a skillet sizzling over a portable hob. While he sees Sayo's breakfast, he explains that he was chosen to guard Sayo because of their name similarity. He has also been tasked with assisting Polka, whom he advises not to visit the manor due to the ongoing police investigation. Meanwhile, Takeru, shadowed by his bodyguards Taipei and Bao, approaches the inspectors and expresses surprise at seeing them since he thought the police finished interrogations the day prior. Iwanome says he and Arase have come from a slightly different department, bearing questions for Takeru specifically. Later on, after exiting the manor, Arase remarks to Iwanome that Takeru's 2 subordinates are probably killers. Iwanome merely smiles before instructing Arase to put Pop, Tozawa, and Yatsu on standby should Comps 3 find itself tangling with the Shinoyamas. It sounds to Arase like Iwanome has a lead, which Iwanome does in the form of a Shinoyama family photograph. Arase quickly recognizes the teenager from the alley, aka Polka Shinoyama. Takumi Kuruya cowers under his desk due to a lunch break visit from Tsubaki Iwanome and Kozaburo Arase, the former of whom want Corpse God to tell his fortune. Arase declines to have his read since he is suspicious of receiving a bad fortune and instead follows Misaki Sakimiya into the divination room, where he, Sayo Shinoyama, and Xiaoyu Lei will watch the proceedings. Corpse God informs Iwanome that he cannot divine the location of escaped convicts, something that Iwanome readily says in his job, not Corpse God's. Corpse God replies that he is not a clairvoyant. He can only trace the past path before and the infinite paths in front of Iwanome. The Corpse God drops some clairvoyant truth bombs, leaving Iwanome shocked and covering lunch expenses. Who knew foreseeing the future came with a lunch bill? Later, Xiaoyu considers snitching to the police should he notice Polka doing something shady. Corpse God begins by alluding to Iwanome's specific police division community safety. Information that Iwanome knows Takumi can easily look up and feed Polka through a hidden earpiece. In a flashback event, Miyabi Hosorogi tosses Iwanome, whose hair is black, and he wore a matching color outfit, a pack of Marubos, Iwanome's favorite cigarette brand. Tucked into the cigarette pack is a folded piece of paper upon which a simplified symbol has been drawn. Once Iwanome confirms that he has memorized the symbol, Hosorogi burns the paper and declares that the symbol is both the signpost they must follow and a one-way ticket to death. Meanwhile, in the present, with a concerted effort and a thin smile, Iwanome regains his composure and hands Corpse God money to cover the session and whatever damage to his outfit he may have caused. Over lunch at the curry restaurant, Nancy, Arase, once Iwanome gives him the go-ahead, asks Iwanome what came over him earlier. Iwanome admits that he lost control, which Arase says is unlike him. Iwanome needs a few minutes to collect his thoughts before answering, though Arase does not mind. He is relieved that Iwanome is himself again. In a later scene, Corpse God tells Misaki and Takumi that when he had made a pact with Hosorogi, he had promised to resolve some of Hosorogi's regrets in exchange for Hosorogi's services. Takumi imagines that Hosorogi will move on should his regrets be resolved, though Hosorogi claims he will honor the pact. Privately, he tells himself he will have to face up to Lisa sooner or later. Later on, the morning of Solitaire's scheduled comeback performance finds Takumi, Polka, Misaki, and even Sayo awake with varying anticipation levels. Sayo draws the attention of the others to the window just as the channel host on Solitaire's antique radio announces breaking news from Shinjuku. Upon this news, Corpse God murmurs, utterly stunned from where he stands next to Sayo. Misaki asks him if he recognizes the symbol, and in response, he mentions that it is the emblem of the fallen empire from which he hails. In a flashback event in the imperial palace of the Baiandi Empire, Aisley's sword frail points at a banner overlooking a grand staircase and tells Corpse God that the symbol adorning it is the emblem of the empire that shall be Corpse God's home. The young emperor declares that he redesigned the emblem upon ascending the throne, for his father's version was much simpler. He then proudly shows his original sketch for the redesigned emblem. Meanwhile, in the present, Corpse God stares at the symbol adorning the dirigibles in Shinjuku's airspace and says the symbol is the emblem of his fallen empire. Moreover, members of a certain organization discuss online both Solitaire's uncloaking of the symbol and fire-breathing bug's immolation of the members' brethren. Later on, Iwanome supposes that if Solitaire is behind the dirigible stunt, he must have involved either Miyabi, Hosorogi, or the people Hosorogi was pursuing due to the symbol. Regardless, Arase mentions that Comps 3 keeps encountering this symbol 5 years after Hosorogi's disappearance seems more than a coincidence. In another flashback event, Solitaire, disguised as a security guard, asks the grocer for the price of the information he seeks. Grocer replies with a staggering sum of 3 trillion yen, which Grocer has rounded down for Solitaire specifically. Looks like we're not just decoding symbols, we're cashing in on the symbol craze. Move over, Bitcoin. While in the present, Solitaire broadcasts the footage of his mannequin's death on the Solitaire channel. It explains to the audience that his dummy was shot just 58 minutes after the dirigibles were airborne. He claims that the only things high enough to discover that his dummy was lounging on a dirigible could have been police helicopters. Later on, Corpse God assures Sayo that he shall return Polka's soul to Polka's body. Takumi, flabbergasted, asks how Corpse God can possibly expect Sayo to buy the story. Corpse God replies that he supposed resolving the situation would be easier if Sayo did not. In fact, to Takumi's great shock, Sayo does believe in the story. Furthermore, Takumi asks Corpse God what their next move is, given the symbol's clear significance to him. Corpse God says that while he does not mind if the emblem is publicized, he must confront anyone who is striving to use the emblem for some purpose, and especially someone who might defile such a precious memory as this. Later on, Iwanome and Takasu engage in a conversation where Takasu asks Iwanome if he's referring to Hosorogi as Pebble, who apparently stops Iwanome from fitting in. Takasu then grips Iwanome's shoulder and mentions that he doesn't approve of referring a superior officer as Pebble. In response, Iwanome confidently removes Takasu's hands from his shoulders and mentions that he didn't mean Hosorogi, but rather the rat in the huge building who drove the inspector out. 4 people fill out their intake forms for their respective fortune-telling sessions with Corpse God. The first is the medical practitioner who previously visited Corpse God. The second and third are teenagers or young women, and the fourth is a middle-aged man. The lady with the bobbed hair wonders if the fortune teller is legit, and the medical practitioner replies that he is visiting the fortune teller for a second time after being convinced of his legitimacy during their first session. The mild-mannered old man just eavesdrops like it's the juiciest podcast in town. Thereupon, Corpse God pulls on his fortune-telling garb and asks if Takumi Kuria has learned anything about the emblem. Takumi says his all-nighter revealed nothing, but he does suspect that the case must be serious due to public safety's involvement, and how Inspector Miyabi Hosorogi went missing while tracking the emblem down. Later, in a room dedicated to the Tena Sorimura investigation inside the headquarters of the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department, a business suit-clad Iwanome briefs the intra-department task force on Solitaire's history and suggests that they will cross paths with Solitaire if they likewise pursue the publicized symbol. As Yamanota stands to leave, Corpse God asks him if he knows a girl with pigtails who uses a wheelchair. Staring at the girl's spirit with his evil eye, he says that even though the girl's speech is incomprehensible, the girl is evidently distressed by the path that Solitaire treads. Solitaire then exits the building to find drizzling rain and the 2 girls from before preparing to weather it. The girl with bobbed hair lends her friend her umbrella and dons a rain poncho bearing the kanji for fire safety before the pair set off. Solitaire notices and questions fire-breathing Bug's aesthetic tastes. Above him, Corpse God considers the strange coincidence of 2 people asking the same question in a row. Later on, Corpse God dreams about the day an enormous sinkhole opened in the Imperial capital to swallow all units of the Imperial Army, save for General Darrell's unit, which the Homewrecker Dragon had stolen away. The dream shifts to the deaths of Corpse God's found family of 5. Corpse God hopelessly asks that his mentor forgive him for failing to protect the mortals or forgive those who killed him. Later on, with binoculars in his left hand, a Shinoyama employee observes Xiaoyu's vastly augmented attacks on Solitaire, who frantically dodges them. The Shinoyama employee then reports it to Takeru Shinoyama with the cell phone in his right hand. Takeru Shinoyama sets down his phone and muses to Bao, Taipei, and Yoshigi that this activity is not quite the activity he was expecting. As Takeru speaks, Lemmings observes the rooftop fight from an even higher rooftop. In a building stairwell, fire-breathing Bug belittles the bastard children of Sabaramond as deplorables for using a child, in essence Polka Shinoyama. Corpse God asks if Sabaramond is on Earth and whether Bug has ties to the Bayandai Empire or the Kingdom of Nyanhild. The Raincoat Bug, participating in the call, wonders if Polka is playing dumb, but decides he's not. Meanwhile, Xiaoyu questions what a fugitive could owe a police internal affairs inspector before speculating that the dirigible stunt was a one-man stage show. Solitaire's heart speeds up, suggesting to Xiaoyu that he guessed right, but Solitaire improvises that he came to check if anything happened to Hosorogi. Although Tena Sorimura appears to be keeping cool while dodging Xiaoyu Lei's attacks, his heart pounds, and his brain is baffled as to who Xiaoyu is. Xiaoyu pauses to ask why Solitaire is here, and Solitaire seizes the bluffing opportunity to answer yes. However, he supposes he will have to repay Hosorogi later. Later on, Bao asks Takeru Shinoyama if Rozan, Shinoyama's bodyguard, knows about Lemmings. Takeru replies that he has not disclosed much about his agency to his family, but assures Bao that he has instructed Lemmings to avoid harming Xiaoyu, no matter the harm Xiaoyu may inflict on him. Shortly after, during a confrontation, Lemmings takes another struggling step forward, breaks the bonds, and swings a punch that Solitaire evades. Solitaire chides Lemmings for ignoring stage cues, even as he climbs onto the guardrail in a last-ditch retreat, making Xiaoyu doubt whether the two are really in cahoots. In the other world, as Izli's sword frail stares out at the ruins of the Imperial capital and the sea lapping at its cliffs, Rimelka asks her what is on her mind. Izliz replies that she has been sentimental about the Empire, and soon Romelka teasingly says that Izliz is actually thinking about Corpse God. So the Empire's in ruins, but the real disaster is Izliz catching feelings for the Corpse God. Talk about an otherworldly crush. In a flashback event, Izliz gives Corpse God a lesson on constructing a netherworld overflow temple. Meanwhile, in the present, a confident man views tweets about the flock of hands and the Shakuzawa skeletons concurrently with incoming posts on the Bastard's anonymous message board. The Bastards seem generally convinced that this is otherworldly. Power is their right and duty to claim for themselves. Soon the blonde female bouncer returns to Yotokoro and informs Lisa Kuraki that the police are on the move. Lisa thinks something big will happen in Shinjuku. Meanwhile, Misaki Sakimiya briefly wakes up and then goes back to sleep. In a living room, a really tall guy checks his phone and tells his sister, who's sitting on a love seat, that things are getting interesting. The TV turns on, showing a video of huge hands moving in a faraway city.